Hi there. I want to give you a taste of this training program which I created for Colossa. This is a 1 hour tutorial how I created Intergalactic mushroom, but there is like way more, from the basic animation to simulations, X particle setups. So I believe there is something useful for any aspiring motion designer. So try to gather as much knowledge as you can. The link is underneath in the description, and now just enjoy this free tutorial. Have a great day and good luck on your journey. So first I just modeling the cap of the mushroom. I create some references, I put some mushroom, and then I just open in C4D, one of the side view. I brought the texture in the background, adjusted the height and weight and everything width, and then I just start drawing the spline. I make sure that I was using the snapping tool to actually snap to the grid, or you can just use it with 0. And then if you use the lath object, it will make it really flat looking donut. So then you need to a little bit make the bevel, or like just put the curve underneath it, and you create this nice lovely shape. The next thing I did, I bring the bulge effector, and then I could able to animate the strength and simulate the breadth. If you bring the linear and you adjust the spline, you can actually bring the animation speed, and you can start animating the curve like it's gonna be like floating through. I use the maximum number of my frames, which is 336, so that's just one cycle. If you divide it by 2, it's 2 cycles, divide by 4, 4 cycles. So basically adjusting the speed to achieve this kind of like jellyfish effect. I learned this from technique from Daniel Danielson. It's actually pretty cool, and that's how I created like the breathing cap of our mushroom. Then with cloner object I was adding some details, but later on I decided just to use the texture instead because I was getting some kind of offset issues. Then I just create a simple spline circle, adjust it a little bit, use the sweep nerves, put in the cloner for creating our stem of our mushroom. It was kind of cool, simple technique. I didn't want to have a just basic shape looking stem, so this was kind of like more interesting to me. Then I use a volume builder, and then I start like smoothing out to have more smooth and organic shape. After that I actually realized that if you don't use the sweep nerves and you just use a circle, or just cloning the splines, you can actually bring them to volume builder as well. But first, before I did it, I just put the cloner on the circle. I clone this X or whatever it is, or details in the mushroom, then just push apart to get a random effect. And after that, I just make sure that this circle I'm using for cloning is also put under the effect, so it's breathing together with it. Then after that, as I mentioned before, I adjusted the shapes of the splines, and then I brought those splines and I put them to volume builder. When you use them in the volume builder, you can actually bring the splines individually, not using the sweep nerves, and it kind of allows you some benefits. So you can adjust the spline width, which is really great because then you can get more organic shape for free, basically. After that, just like some last adjustments, making everything tighter, and look on the bulge effect. It also depends if using negative or positive value. In my case, it was working better than negative value. So then you can just play with the keyframes, like how fast you want to have this effect. And after that, I just wanted to make sure that I have this like bottom grid, which has a cap on the mushroom. What I use for it, I just use subdivision on the disk. It can give you all those nice details and lines. And then if you're using the disk and subdividing it, then you can actually convert them to the edges. But first, let's just make our scenes a bit cleaner here. So I didn't put my null objects here as I'm usually using, so I'm just like tightening everything up. And then I'm able to go to the disk and convert it to edges, basically, or edge to spline. That was the name of the function. When we got this, then I can do later on like more effects. First of all, I was like a bit figuring out how to get rid of the outer ring because it was all connected. But then I just put everything underneath the cap and hide it and put it pretty tight there. You can bring everything under the same group, so everything is animated together, so it can create you like nicely animated mushroom. The next part was just the bringing other objects I downloaded, like the flowers, stones, and whatever you can find for filling your environment, and just preparing those models to place them in our scene. So these are the stones. I didn't even use all of them. I just select a bunch of different ones, copy them in the scenes, same as other objects, save the project because I didn't save it till now, and then I was just able to start creating the scene. So let's just place them in and create some ground which we can use later on for placing all the objects. I was first trying with the disk, but then I ended up just using the plane, and because it's kind of easier to extend if you need to. And then from this stuff, you can just create with the grab tool. You can just create small bumps around there. If you hold control, you can just moving them up and down vertically, like in basically perpendicular to the spline. I brought some trees just to get some basic composition to frame our image, basically our scene. I didn't even use many of them. Like if I would do this properly, I would probably use Forester or some other plugins, but I didn't know if you have them, so I just went for the free models of the trees. Same with the flowers. So I just copy a bunch of different flowers and just make sure that they're all the same scale, because you can have different scales, so you can just put them under the pre-groups and change the scales to make sure it's actually kind of fitting and they're on evenly. I even delete some grass on the bottom because it was just, I knew I'm not gonna be able to see it, and just additionally polygons you have to render. So I simplify the scenes a bit, place the flowers there, place the stones there, and being kind of ready to next phase. Here you can see I was putting the stones. In the beginning I was slightly issue with the stones because they're kind of like flying all around, so then I need to use the axis tool and make sure that they have actually center axis, because they were in the beginning like the back of the stones all have the axis in the same point. So then I just align them. Then you can play with the seed, some random rotation. I mean, again, if you're working on an environment, you oftentimes ended up placing the main, at least the hero stones by hand, but because I knew I wanted to kind of like bigger scale, I just like went for random seeds and looking for something with looks somewhat decent. The flowers, of course, this is not enough flowers, but it's because I will be adding the grass later on. So I was just trying to get some few interesting looking plants in the camera, and then hand place a bunch of supporting like second heroes in our scenes, like other mushrooms, which is basically the same mushrooms. I was just rotating them to get some kind of variation and changing different scales. But apart of that, it's pretty straightforward, just to get some like basic composition. Here's my placeholder for astronaut later on, just to eyeball the scale, adjust the stones, and that's about that. Like, I mean, this is not really a tutorial for creating some high-end environment. I would recommend you maybe a tutorial for Josh Pierce. He's creating like tips how to make the path there and working vertex maps and make a little bit more complex looking scenes. After that, I just set the grass, set up some basic values, and I didn't even want to emit them everywhere, so I just select the polygons which are actually seen by the camera, and that I was using for emitting to kind of save some calculating power. Then I readjust the stones, look for some more additional stones, and play with the rotation, position, and stuff like that, and play with the thickness and some additional details of our grass. In the beginning, when you render it, like nothing is really set up, no lights, no textures, so we get quite ugly looking scene, but this is just for kind of setting up the light, see how actually things start working together, finding what angle we're gonna need, length of the grass, and just start building some kind of like foundation for our scene. Not even foundation, but look deving is part of the look dev. So when we were somewhat happy and seeing that it's gonna somehow work, then we can slowly move to next phase. Checking what we need, what's gonna be the composition, how high we need to have it, and then just kind of like get some kind of like basic light to see the depth of our scene. Now when I was like feeling okay, the composition is ready to go to the next step, you can just always come back and improve it. I decided to like play still with the hair thickness, add some more hero stones, and move to another part. The next part, I start preparing the basic shaders. So first I started with the cap. I will just first like align it, get a little bit more dominance in the scene, and then I start working on the sky. Like as you can see, I went for stylized sky, so I just use this basic gradient, cut up the mountains, get something more playful in there, adjust the light, and then export it as our texture for the background. In the background, I just use a simple technique, it's often used just like one big plane object, where I use the same ratio, so like 16:9 for our texture, so it's make sure it's fitting to what I had in Photoshop, and just directly put it in the source. It means it's just visible no matter what, and I don't need to have lights on it. And then I just get this kind of silhouette effect. I kind of actually like it. It's quite stylized, but I didn't want to keep it just like so dark, so then I start bringing additional lights later on. But next, let's start working on the cap. As I told you, I decided to use a texture instead of cloning the objects on it. So I just made a bunch of different circles, filled them with white, then I contracted the selection, used some feather, and then you can just delete the inside to kind of get some gradient or fade off. Of course, there's a bunch of different ways how you can create this, but this is just like one of the easiest. And then I brought the universe or a galaxy, because it's intergalactic mushroom which contains all the wisdom of the universe. And I just play with some levels, adjustments, and to make sure that I'm getting the textures I need. Then this shader, I mean, you will need to also have other functions here, because what I need to use these textures, I need the matte object I'll be using, and then I need to use it for the depth channel later on as well. So I just need to download, like save multiple different PNGs or like JPEGs or TIFF or whatever you need to from this file, and then just start building our shader from it. This is going to be the most complex shader in the scene, so I hope it's going to be everything clear what I'm using. And now when I'm working in these ones, I'm trying to actually invert those and create the depth channel as I told you before. So we have like the black, and then it's gradiently going more and more to the white. So this depth channel I'm using for displacement, which is going to be essential part of this shader. And then I will be using some other stuff. First, I don't have the UVs, so I'm just using spherical projection, trying to get something which doesn't look too bad, like play a little bit of stretching. Then if you put the redshift material or redshift tag, then you can actually align and increase the displacement, and you can have the displacement from our textures. If you need to adjustments, you can always go to displacement and change the range of the displacement. But this is how I actually created these kind of bumps on the mushroom. Then I just start adding some more lights. So, I'm using view from the camera, so this is actually checking the aiming on the mushroom from the left behind. Just some kind of warmish tone, like from the sunset or from this like weird atmosphere on whatever planet we are right now. Then I just brought the textures from the mushroom I downloaded on the Sketchfab. So this is a pretty standard procedure. And I start putting some noise to add some just like details on the bump map, and as well you can use it for reflection and other stuff, just to get some like more variation on the shader, because in the general it was kind of pretty plain and default. So I did a few more, and I decided I will use the white dots on the mushroom emitting as well. So I just selected them with the levels, I separated them from the scene, and then I brought the emissive material and I just combined them together. By doing that, I could be able, with emissive function or with emissivity, brighten up and lit up our mushrooms as well. The trunk actually came with the tree. It's not really complex shader, so again, nothing crazy here happening. Just adjusting adding some color noise to get some kind of differences in the shader, and I put it in the stem of our mushroom. Now when I start lighting up our mushrooms, you can see they are nicely glowing in the darkness. And then I just went back to mushroom and decided to add some kind of more noise, just to get some more randomness. This noise actually I like a lot, so I use it in the color channel as well. You can just use the color layer, use it as a mask, and even though they come quite dark, I was kind of happy with the details they have and how they are lighting in the scene. Then after that, I just did some tweaks, and I decided I want to bring some river in our scene. So I use the grab tool. In the grab tool, you can just hold the middle click and in the mouse and change the radius of it, and with control and dragging, you can just make a little bit of hole. There's different ways how you can create it, but I just like make the hole, and then I put the plane with color, with some water. And just the simplest way how you can make some river or a pond or whatever you need. Then I downloaded a few textures on ambient CG just to get some more details to our scenes. There are PBR materials which I always prefer to use. So you just use a normal map, a bump map, displacement map, and so on. I didn't even need a displacement map in this one. Because if you're using displacement, of course, it's increasing the time render, and I knew I will be covering it a lot with the grass later on. So then I had a glass looking stuff, and I put some noise in the bump map to create like some kind of wrinkle looking water. Adjust the stones, just play with some random size, random rotation to get some more variety, and start improving the lighting our scene. It's still just few lights in the scenes right now. I'm using the same technique as I used before. I'm just like looking for different angles, looking for some interesting rim light on our mushroom, or kind of like backlighting basically. I have like one light from the top of the scenes. Then I just create some kind of a glass looking balls or materials which I use for those eggs on the mushroom. And you can see we are getting some nice details on the water as well. When we get all this, I can move into another chapter or like new stuff. I just had one light from the front just to kind of see the difference. I always like have a few different light setups and just clicking through to see what works, what doesn't work, and start naming some lights to have more organized scenes. I have like one moonlight, which is like spilling the bluish tone on an entire scene. Then few rim light, which is giving the warm color from the back, and then one top light on the mushroom. Here's the shader. Here you can see that I'm just like preparing with the noise some roughness to get more details in the reflections, because right now it was really flat. So just playing with different noises. And also I wanted to make the noise inside of the dots we created. So I used the mask from the Photoshop, and I plug it into color layer as a cutout mask to be able to bring the noise only in the parts I needed. Then I was just like using the noise for multiple different things for the bump map, and so I'm just tweaking the shader here, bring the color layer, giving different tones to our mushroom to don't have like all the color looking the same, just to get a little bit more variation, because right now it was like getting really flat still now. This is still just kind of like ugly preview, but I just wanted to see how it looks. So I was just connecting directly to the surface to see our color layer, putting some light directly on top of it to see exactly what's going on. And I wanted to bring the animation also to the noise in our spots on the mushroom. When I actually turn the lights off or put the lights as they're supposed to be, become really dark, so I don't really see that much anyway. And I wanted to play also with the emission of this noise in the mushroom to be able to kind of like breathe with it. So here is just some like adjusting and tweaking of the scale and the variations of different noises, looking what could work better. Because also, you know, we're working for Instagram, sometimes we just make such as noise, small noises or details, and then on a phone you don't see nothing. And then I brought the web, which I created from the edge to spline, and bring some material to it as well. Here you can see I'm just still adjusting, finding what noise worked the best for me, but this is more like trial and error. But you can see we're getting like more variations. Maybe the noise is too small, so just make it slightly bigger to work better with the scale what we are using here, and just switching different channels. I was definitely using the connect to node a lot. As I told you in the beginning, I set up the shortcut for the E button so I can really quickly see all different layers that I'm using, and this was setting the noise which I was using inside of those spots. Just a little bit tinted, some bluish tone, and now you can see if I start improving or highering the intensity, it will start becoming more visible. And after that, I got this kind of result, which is really dark, but I started liking what started happening here. Like it's kind of bluish, but we have the moonlight here. We have like really dominant mushrooms. The key mushroom, our hero one, is still quite dark, so I'm not really happy with that one. And also, I want to put the light coming from the bottom of the cap, which is gonna be kind of like the source energy. So I brought some area lights inside, and I start playing with the size, the intensity, the color to start giving some more interest to the scene. It actually started looking like a UFO, but I kind of like it. It is kind of like unknown object, you don't know what it is, and that's what I kind of like enjoy about this scene, just to kind of getting the surreal looking stuff. Then just setting some details, setting one more small mushroom in front of the camera, finding the right spot for it, which she could go home, and now I'm kind of getting somewhat happy with the composition and with what we are building here. Now put the background. As you can see, trees are still back, really dark, so I decided to revisit my rim lights, and if you can see, like I'm getting the light on the cap of the mushroom but also on the trees. Now we need to find like what works the best. Like I love cheating with Redshift, so you can always go to project, you can exclude it from affecting certain objects. But if you work with Octane, I know it's a bit trickier. I know the function is there as well, but I think the Redshift is a bit better in terms of the workflow on this. So then I'm just like adjusting those lights, trying to make the trees a little bit stand out. Like I still want to have them fairly dark as a silhouette, but I want to be pitch black. Also, when I was adding those worm lights, it started giving me like some nicer detail on the grass, like more gradient variations. So I was quite happy for that. After that, I went for the flowers or plants, and I all connect them and merge them into one material because they was coming with 3 different shaders. Then you can use the color user data, and you can use object ID, and it gives you all different colors. And then you can just use some gradient and map out on this color data. So as a result, you will get like some variation. So even though I'm using one shader for all the plants, because each have different ID, each getting different color from this gradient, and it can give you like some nicer variation. Even though all blue was looking quite good as well. Then I just a Fernal to don't have like so flat looking color on all of them, to get some like just edges highlighted. And then it was a question of how to combine those things together. So I just brought the color layer node, and I bring all those things together and use those one as a multiplying effect. So then we get like a really dim, kind of dark looking plants, but it's okay because what we want, we will be bringing them light through emission later on. So right now we're just kind of getting them some more believable shading. Again, this is still kind of a really rough, quick way how you can achieve something like that, but it was working just fine for the purposes I need. Then I brought the plane effector for this cloner, and I turn off like affecting the positions, and I just use color user data, and you can see what's happening here. Now we have the color data, like the linear field from left to right, so the left are not affected, right are full, they are white. And then you can use again this as a combination. So what I did, I used this again, I brought the color layer node, and I basically use it as a mask, so the black was multiplying and was overlaying all the rest of the plants. So now you can see that on the left they are dark, on the right they are kind of like vivid or bright, and that's basically the key essential of the effect I was using. Right now it's still linear field, so I just decided to change to torus field, because I will be animating this torus field as the light's coming through the nature towards the plant and back. So here just doing some small adjustments, making sure that I'm getting what I need, and then I was able to, after that I just kept working on the lighting. Here I'm getting like a little bit better vivid looking shaders, and it's definitely kind of getting pop out. Like it's everything became too vibrant, maybe too vivid, but I'm definitely happy with the direction I was heading. Then I just need to adjust a bit the grass, playing with some more shaders change also the shader for the web from the below, which is going to be also greatly affected by the lights which we'll be using from the bottom, because depends on the reflections you set for them. This is the shader for the cap. I'm just like adjusting here, adding some more details, adjusting the noise, and just playing with all different parts of this shader to make it look a little bit more natural. Maybe mainly the noise inside of the our spots. You can see now we're already getting darker, adjusting the main lights and playing with the lights inside of the mushroom. It's still in the scenes right now. We don't have that many lights yet. I kind of like the version also without the stem. Like the stem is kind of interesting. It helps you read more as mushroom. But without it definitely was kind of looking interesting to me as like kind of like an alien or UFO flying above. And here I was just like adjusting the emission from the noise I'm using in the cap, because I will be animating that one as well. So in the beginning it's gonna be really dark, and as we are like breathing in, everything will be glowing up. So it's just some test render what the noise is doing inside of the cap, and then I was just like checking the animation also, the timing. They will be actually looping perfectly. I made the marks for breathe in, breathe out, which I was like using based on some article I found what is actually should be the amount of the seconds you're breathing in, holding, breathing out. And then I was animating the torus field, which is lighting our flowers. And in the same time, I was creating one more torus field, preparing it for our animation. This torus field will be used as a light for our scene. And I was just like checking what's happening right now, how does the grass is animated, what's happening with the main mushroom, and preparing for the next shaders. So now I created the shader, which is just like a highly emissive material, which I put in the torus field. And I made the torus field invisible. Now you can see when it's visible, how it's like obstructing everything. But then when you bring it invisible, you can just light the scene with it. So when I start animating the toruses coming in and out, it's like lighting the entire scene and our plants becoming alive. So that's kind of the key element of this scene. I'm just like adjusting a little bit the shader on them, like changing the plants, and I wanted to make sure that also I will get a lot of variations of different colors. Here's the color ID. Because I was using multi-instances, it actually removes some of my variations. So I just make multiple different clones to be sure that I have like more colors in this like cloner setup. You can see here I'm just clicking between the instances because I was looking for the performance, I wanted good speed, but now we can already see around our mushroom, and that's actually what I was looking forward to. So I was really happy with this like current phase. It actually kind of looks interesting, dark as well, but I wanted to lit up eventually later on more. Here I'm just like switching different type of nodes. If I use a render instance or multi-instance, it's way faster, but then I'm actually was getting less variations. So I just make multiple of clones of flowers under the cloner object to be sure that I can have the more variations in the scene. When I was happy with it, I combined those effects together. I combined torus. I was just playing with different placing. If it's going to be intersecting with the ground and we will have some harder edge, or it's going to be a bit higher on top of it. Playing with the noise. Here you can see it from different angles. This is our kind of like hero element basically in the scene, or like second hero. This is like the key of animation. And it actually kind of looks interesting even from like 3/4 or from different angle. And I'm just like playing with the camera, finding some adjustments and trying to find the way what's going to be working the best. I mean, this element or this effect was important for me, so then I thought later on I will make the particles also to support this effect. And here you can just see like I was using those two basically frame 96 and 192. They were like my main keyframes, so I put the keys like markers on them, and all the animations were animating to those keyframes and then hold and then from those keyframes out. I was using it for everything, for the emission of the torus, for the emission of the mushroom, basically everything was driven by those keyframes. Then I play with the hair. I want it to be hair, kind of changing and animating a little bit with the circle as well. So I set them the dynamics, and I was using the wind effector to kind of blow them towards the mushroom and then like blow them back to default position. It was a little bit harder to find a way how to make those hairs kind of loop, because if you're just blowing with the wind in and out, it's like simulation, so it's kind of hard to get the same position. So I at the end ended up using like blowing the wind towards the mushroom, and then I stopped blowing, and then I just used the effectors, and I animated rest mix and rest hold to kind of go back and start on the initial frame, or start on the same initial position, which ended up working the best, especially like the stuff like the particles and like hair and stuff. It's a bit hard to animate if you want to keep in the loop, which was for this effect or for this scene is like super important. Here you can see some kind of like quick stuff, how it works together. Then I decided to support with other additional elements. So I brought the mushrooms, and the mushrooms I start bending with the bend effector, but I want to have the lights also underneath the mushroom. The problem was when I start bending them, the light was staying on the same position, so it was not doing what I need. So I use actually pin and constrain, and then I kept them connected to certain part of the mushroom. So when the mushroom was like bending back, the lines were actually bending with the mushroom, which helped me a lot, because otherwise I would have to hand animate it, or I would have to give up to having the lights, because otherwise they were just like statically hanging out in the air. And then I just add additional bulge to help the breathing with stuff. So in the next chapter, I decided to bring the character, because I'm using the characters quite a lot in my scenes. I have the entire astronaut series, and in general, I'm bringing them to so many different projects, because I think they can bring the emotion and you can communicate through them quite well. So I usually do hand keyframe animation. Those actually I was animating in the Maya, because I had like good rig there. But here you can see some of my process where I was, for example, animating my first astronaut, and my friend Woo-Sang Kang was acting for me, and then based on him I was like animating the model. So let's just dive in and bring this astronaut here. I found this one on Sketchfab. You can see the author. It says decent amount of the polygons. It's not great, and texture doesn't fit really well, but it's okay, because we don't need textures in this case, because I just needed to have more silhouette astronaut. So I just like download it, and then you need to get ready for mix ammo basically. So FBX is usually the best for me. I tend to work with sometimes OBJs, but FBX is kind of like my go-to. Just bring it to Nexamon. It has an auto rigger, which I'm not sure if I'm happy. Before there was like the simple rigging tool, which I was really liking, and now there is sometimes you don't have the ability to adjust the way how it rigs you. So I brought the model in here. You can just see that all the bones, they're kind of working well. So right off the bat, it didn't do perfect job with the hands, but it was still decent enough. So I'm just going revisiting the joints and using some simple eye selection with setting the goals. You always like set the top of the place, like for example in the pelvis, and then with the eye selection you put the feet. Same can do with the hand and stuff like that. So that's pretty good if you want to do hand keyframe animation. This works quite well. The shoulders is often a problem, so you need to bring pivot point on the shoulder, which based on where you put the position, you might be flipping the hands to get it to right angle as they should. And then I decided to actually go to make some one more time, and I was looking for some animation. I found some like weird floating animation, so I really slowed it down, bringing it into C4D, and I felt it's kind of fun. It kind of gives you some kind of like secondary movement and bouncing, so I thought, okay, you know what, let's use it as a foundation. And then I went to hands, and I delete all the keyframe on the hands, and I decided to use the eye key rig only on the hands. And on the goals, I set like the bigger icons or circles, so I could easily select them, like as selectors basically on my eye rig. And then I was like looking the way how can I just like very quickly and easy animate on top of the animation. So I made my astronaut separately in the scenes, then I was able just to bring it back to your main scene and start merging everything together. So you can see I make it actually simple. I brought it to new scene because in this moment we have like a lot of objects in the scene, so it's becoming kind of heavy. So you can just copy and take like the camera and some basic stuff like the ground and mushroom and astronaut and bring it to new scene. So you can get like way faster playback and performance. So it's like super smooth and much easier to animate because you don't want to be animating on something which is like super slow. Here's the animation of the astronaut. I just make the repetition, so all the keyframes they are going infinite in the loop. And then I just was animating basically those two controllers I created on the hands. So just kind of like create some gestures that the hands kind of going from away from each other, or when he's breathing in, they're kind of like opening. So it was kind of like easy to animate, just do those things and combining it with this like a floating animation. Then I also animated him like going up and down. So really, it's actually a really simple animation here. And you might get some kind of like interesting floating in the space, let's say believable animation. Of course, it's not having well the inertia bounds of coming up and down, but because the all animation is fairly slow, it was totally okay with what I needed here. So you can just see just some small adjustments, like playing with the rotation, opening it back, moving the hands up and down. If you select those two together, you can just with scale tool, like move them closer and further. And you can see I was also trying to get a little push back, so it was kind of traveling back and forth. When you have the animation done, you can just convert it to motion clip, and then you can like easily offset it or loop it or change the scale. Because if you're working with the keyframes and the joints in C4D, it might get sometimes really heavy if you want to just move them aside or make some offsets. It's get really like slow and clunky. So the motion clip are way faster, but here I wanted to make sure that we are actually looping here. So I use the ripple tool, or I think it's ripple tool. It's like you can select all the points and just stretch them out evenly to make sure that it's gonna be going for two loops, and then when you're finishing, it's gonna be just looping perfectly in the beginning. Here I'm just like playing with the keyframes, just adjusting just small things like details, like how far he will go back, how much the mushroom will push him back when breathe out, how much it will suck him in when he breathe in. So this is just kind of like small adjustments to get some kind of like, yeah, as I said before, floating effect. Here just adjusting the legs, seeing like one leg was actually moving too much, so I just like select again, I use the same tool and I just like select all the keyframes and I lower the scale how much they are moving up and down, so it just allowed me to lower this overall movement of the legs here. And I also wanted to add lights here on him. I was thinking to be one of the indicators, but I don't think I even ended up using this light at the end. I just lock it to one of the bones and wanted to have it as a kind of like indicator on the scaphandre and on his like backpack to kind of like glow on the scene, which I think is kind of like, I think I was using this detail in astronauts in episode 2. You can see that it's glowing too much, and also if you're adding more lights, it's always good to adjust how much they're affecting your volume actually. Okay, so now when I was somewhat happy with the lighting, I started working on the X particles. I use them for multiple different things. The first of them, I put one under the cap and just like shooting down in the y-axis, and then I use the follow surface modifier, and I bring this volume mesh we created on the stem. So then it just kind of, I use the trail object, so it created me this kind of like nice effect of like the veins or just the lines, roots, whatever we call it, coming from the mushroom downwards. Then I make it editable when it was final stage, and I use the mouse spline, because when I was using the mouse spline, what I could do, I could actually animate the splines at the end. So again here, just doing one more time, just creating the basically emitting the particles using the flow surface. Then at the end phase, I'm just making them editable, bringing it to flow surface. Bringing them to most spline, where I use it as a source. And then you can just play with animation with end and start. Also, there's one option you can switch if it's going to be animating it all at once or like individual elements of the splines. And I was using it also when like the energy was coming out and in. So when on all the lights were closest to mushroom, I just like bring it like the splines were kind of growing towards the mushroom, and I was breathing out. It was just like going down. So again, the same thing. I was just using the main keyframes in the scenes, and they were like driving all the secondary animations. So when I was somewhat happy with the veins and the lines coming out in and out, which I was later on also exporting the mask for it, I started working on the X particles on the ground. So I use the ground which I already had before, and I decided to use noise for the generating of the particles, and also the color noise in the luminance channel for having the different colors for the particles, so you don't have all of them the same color. The particles, when I was shooting with the emitter, they just shoot really high, so then I was adding some turbulence, adjusting the speed, and I just wanted to make this kind of like fairy dust, or just like small particles on the ground. And I just brought the wind, so then kind of like blowing towards the mushroom, and then at the end blowing the back. When I did the first test, the particles all around the scenes, it was kind of like too much, and then they were getting towards the camera. So I decided to maybe try to use attractor and help them, so when they're getting blown, the attractors start like sucking them in the mushroom. But it was getting like overwhelming. There was like particles kind of all around the place. You can see there's a scene where there's like particles fairly visible, but they're getting everywhere. So now I just link them again through color data or vertex node to get them, and you can see they're kind of like fairly prominent, or like not prominent, but they're like taking too much attention. They're like blowing all the way towards the camera, quite high. I wanted to keep them really low above the ground, like not, because especially they don't have the details, they're just like dots, so I don't want them to look like basically, yeah, overpowering the rest of the image. So here I'm just like adjusting the animation of the intensity of the light in the mushroom to become really bright when we're like getting to the center point, like playing with the tangents to light have like increasingly like bright and shining. And for the particles, I was also using the small technique that was actually flipping those particles as a disk, but I think I'll be building it in a second. I wanted to kind of fake or cheat to see more under the mushroom, so I just like rotated the cap, lifted up a little bit, just to have a little bit more visible to see what's going on over there. Of course, if you lift it up too high, then you have the light shooting for everywhere. So it was just a personal preference, just like small tweaking of the lights back and forth to get something I'm somewhat happy with. Then again, adjusting the emission of the supporting the mushrooms, animating in and out. So in the beginning they are really dark. You know the drill. I'm just using the same keyframes, so it's kind of like in this animation is actually kind of fairly simple animation. There's some simulations around it, but otherwise everything is driven by just two directions, in and out. And here I start playing with the leaves. I wanted to have some gravity and some randomness. You can even put the randomness on the gravity node. And I just wanted to make in separate scene leaves, which I use the model from the tree. I just select one of the leaves. I make sure I'm using the alpha to cut it out, to don't have just like rectangles, and then I add in extended data some randomness, so they look like kind of more organic. And then I didn't want to emit from the actual leaves because it'd be heavy geometry, so I just make like this kind of like balls, which I made later on invisible, and those were used for emitting of the particles, which having those functions I set up. So they have the gravity, they have just some rotation, and there is a turbulence slightly which is blowing to them, so they're also like leaves just like slowly falling down and catching some different winds. And then there is an attractor, which is a fall effector in the middle. It's about the leaves being catched and drawn towards the mushroom, because I don't want to all of them like just directionally fly right over there. So I wanted to just smoothly just pick some of them and basically call them towards our hero object. Here, as you can see, there's doing some craziness a little bit, because the attractor, when it's strong and you get to the point, to the center, it just starts like levitating or like I don't want to say jiggling, like jumping around. So it's kind of too strong. And now I turn on the second particle systems, and it was getting kind of crazy. You know, it's kind of the particles all around the place. And usually I'm trying to have as little modifiers as possible. But in this case, I made two different attractors, one for the particles on the dust and one for the leaves. And for the dust, I kept really low. I just didn't want to fly high in my screen. So I really reduce the speed of those particles. I made them specific attractor, just right above the ground. And even I was blowing to them with a wind effector under specific angle. Same I did the turbulence. Like, it was hard to find the turbulence working for leaves and for the particles on the ground. So I make them separate turbulence. I use the groups, so it allowed me to control those groups like individually, even though they have kind of like same goal in the way, and I have the full control. It was my favorite curl noise, even though it's the most sensitive ones. And then I just like adjusted some speed and additional details, size. I was trying to reduce the particles blowing right in front of the camera, kind of big dots in the screen. And then I wanted to also add this kind of fairy dust effect. Here again, I'm using for the dust like the spherical field for the attractor, so I want to bring all the points, but fairly big majority of it. So I make quite big spherical field, and they just like slowly start sucking in. You can see if you put too high number, it just got kind of crazy. So you need to be kind of playful, not playful, careful with the number or the value you're setting up there, and with the force, because it can get really quickly intense. Even now in the preview, it's kind of like pretty alive, and you can see there's some big ones like flying right in the center of the screen. So I just keep playing with those values, adjusting the strength of the turbulence, strength of the attractor, and now you can start getting a little bit better, like more directional particles flying away and then start blowing towards to me just with the wind. I also adjust the life of them. I wanted to avoid looping the particles, this is the hardest part. So I wanted to kind of slowly kill them before they will be like coming towards the camera, and they'll be like slightly dying off or like being really low on the ground, so they'll be actually hidden under the grass. So it was kind of important for me to help me have almost clean screen towards the end, because then is no problem with looping. So, or you can just fade them away, scale them down, which actually even makes sense here, because you want to emit them only when you breath coming in. So this was perfect for me to get what I need, and then I just need to do like small adjustments, make sure there's like almost none of them towards the end. And now it's time to kind of test them in the scene. So let's just see how they look. Just like this kind of small dusty particles, because I was not sure if the grass is gonna be too high. It might be also problem there, not barely visible. You can see now here like we emitting so many particles, but we actually don't see that many of them. You just see a few in the beginning of the screen. So it's about the playing, just checking in different frames and see like how many more are being emitted. This is already more better looking frame, I would say. You can see you don't want to have to overpower it. You don't have too many of them, but in the same time, yeah, we want to still have this kind of like magic looking vibe from them. So this is just a small tweaking. I was also still playing with the leaves to make them a bit more visible, because before I was using the place shader, like placeholder shader, and then at the end they become kind of way more silhouetted, so the leaves getting quite dark, but you can read their silhouettes. I need to also hide the balls, which I'm using for emitting or as emitters, so I need to not rendering those ones. And yeah, I mean, I think we are looking okay-ish. The trees are still quite dark in this moment. There is something with the textures on the small mushrooms, so I need to tweak that. I'm adding the spline, I'm adding the light on the splines, which are actually crawling on the mushroom here as well. Here I need to bring back the shader because somehow I drop it. So yeah, so I think we are getting almost to the point where we are happy with the things, just like small tweaking of the lights, bringing some rim light, like some warmish or reddish light on the trees to bring this silhouette, really pop up this silhouette, and adjusting the fine lighting with or without the stem, or I was even thinking to remove the stem and just keep the veins from the stem, just to kind of like mimic it, or like have the lights coming in and out. Then there's just some last adjustments. I'll keep coming back to the shader, and if I would open the project now, trust me, I would like again like keep working on, keep adjusting the shader, because I'm still feel it should be more details. I wanted to add a little bit more variety, so I was like testing different nodes what I can get, and the curvature node was actually getting me some kind of interesting results, so I was like using it also, utilizing it as a color to get some kind of like darker spots. And I was actually trying to even find if I would make a kind of luminescent material or like translucent sense, so you could see through a little bit some energy under the cap. But already now it's getting really bright because we have like light coming from it, and light on top of it, then particles. So from the original almost silhouette black and white thing, not black and white, but really like illustrative, I would say, it's already kind of getting quite busy. So I was just adding a few more details on the shader, but other than that, I was kind of happy with the color of this. Maybe some last adjustment on the X shader, bringing some Fresnel, trying to find a way how we can make like maybe more bright light inside and darker outside. So I brought the Fresnel in, start adjusting. The only thing, the Fresnel, sometimes when you're using the ramp on it, doesn't work as I would expect in Redshift, but I was still able to get the result I needed. So I was just using some noise map, selective emission, to don't have just a simple glass material, but to have like more variations and details over there. We can just adjusting, checking some universe, also bringing them into it, and just kind of exploration. So you can see I actually brought the texture from the universe, and then I use the color node and change the color, and then you can map it with the ramp, and at the end it gave me better results than using the noise map and the Fresnel. So, but again, this is another thing, like the element which could be kind of bright and taking all the attention on its own, which I didn't want to. So I was just trying to play with light and make it a little bit more fitting in or adjusted. So this is kind of like final tweaks in this phase for the visual of the file of our mushroom scene. You can see that I'm still using quite heavily the groups on each of the stems. And I even like exported this alembic, this breathing mushroom, because in this moment I already have so many objects in the scene that even like loading stuff in Redshift or updating or playing the feedback was getting pretty slow. So I was trying to find a way so to keep the speed and performance still fairly high. You can see on the main node, just keep adjusting and reiterating. So it's normal that you're coming back to it and revisiting. So here I'm just like shooting the last light changes, like adjusting the sizes, placing the X, changing the shaders. I can also like I usually don't use the SS materials, but I'm oftentimes using the backlit, which if you use, you can actually create some kind of like bright, transparent materials. It's kind of like it's fake in Redshift or a cheat, but it actually works really well. I'm using it quite often. I was using it also in the pirate scene for the balloon. Here's just some like last light changes, adjusting what is being controlled and not. I was adding the light on top, which is kind of like lighting top of the trees. It's kind of like moonlight as well, so you can just see that you're kind of getting define more the crowns of the trees. Of course, you want to overpower it, but it was part of the bringing the silhouette a little bit back. It's kind of giving you more like nice evening vibe. So it's not super dark, but still I was kind of getting, when I was like on the first frame, because all the lights were kind of going down, still kind of getting fairly dark. So I still might should add more lights around the scene. And yes, like, so this is like last changes. Like right now in this frame you can see like totally looks like a UFO just hovering around the forest, which I found kind of cute as well, or interesting. I was like adjusting the lights here for the bending mushrooms to make sure that they are not being visible when the mushrooms are bent, checking the bend deformers if they are like doing what they should be doing, because they sometimes do what they want to do instead. And then I got what I needed, so I was like being able to animate the mushrooms quite nicely towards the main mushroom when the wind blowing up and then back. This effect came from my original piece, like Breathing Forest, where I came with this technique, this idea, I would say. And you can see the particles, like a lot of particles coming in and out. I was just testing how things floating back and forth. And the last big problem here is that it doesn't align the last frame and the first frame. And also the mushroom didn't look like really breathing properly, so I was like adjusting the bulge. I wanted to like express it more, so it's like really like going up and down. You can imagine it even like a big nose, like sniffing the earth. So it's kind of opening when it's like sucking everything in, and then like contracting and blowing away. And I put the bend deformers also on the trees, so they're kind of slowly being gravitating towards the main mushroom. So just like adjusting all those different details. And also what was not working in my test animation was the camera, because the camera was not looping properly. I was using the Vibrate tech, and Vibrate tech doesn't loop. We would have to use a signal from Grayscale Gorilla. So what I did, I actually bake my Vibrate tech, and then I reduce the keyframes to kind of get like just few keyframes instead of being keyframe on every frame. So you can keep the curve, but it's a really simplify, and then it's really easy to change it and make sure that the last frame and the first frame, they have the same value and the tangents going in the same direction. So if you do this way, you can make sure that you have a random movement on the camera, which you can probably in this case even animate it by hand, but I just wanted to have it random, and I wanted to be sure it's looping, so I just like loop it manually by baking it. Then there is like some last adjustments on one more particle system, which is just under the mushroom, which is just like directly like sucking stuff in and just going back, because I was feeling there's not enough like details around the mushroom, like some particles. And here you can see the render we're getting when all the effects are working together. We have animated mushroom, we have animated leaves, and everything is just kind of breathing in and out. So then I was just wanted to make sure that I also exported the external tag from the center of the mushroom. And now we're diving into After Effects. In After Effects, just make the render a bit softer with soft light and blurring this layer. I render multiple different channels. So I render the glow on the veins, which are glowing on the mushroom. I also exported this reflection channel, which is reflecting on the light torus on the leaves. So that I use really blurry, and I could change the color and just give this kind of like nice glow around this light coming through the forest, which was working quite nice. Over the arms, I use the depth channel for various reasons, of either like simulating the volumetric, like the depth in the like fading away towards the darkness or like towards the background, but it doesn't work well in this case because it's like overgrading the stuff and it bringing like the main color on the background. And also for depth of field, but depth of field in this case, because it's wide lens, it makes it look like miniature. If you really use depth of field, everything is really blurry in the background, so I decided to skip it and I added one more effect. I took the main render, the beauty channel, and I just used the kaleidoscope and I wanted to make some kind of trippy effect or like the energy or some kind of like something, some fractal around the mushroom. And this fractal would normally be static, not static, but be like centered on the screen. So I will just first trying to define the effect, playing with the glow, with chroma, trying to find what works. I make sure I'm exporting the external tag from Cinema 4D. And then I was able to bring the C4D. If you do it with Cineware and you extract the data, it was actually not giving me the external tag I needed, which is kind of annoying. So I went through the old way, and the old way is just importing AT file, and then you get the camera and you get all the different details you need. So then I just imported camera, I import this center mushroom external tag, and I align it to make sure I'm keeping in the center. And then when I was getting this energy in the center of the screen, which is animated by the inside shift, like in and out again, just constantly supporting the same effect or the same timing, which in my case was 96 and 192 frames. So then I was just like adjusting this effect, playing also if I can use maybe the depth channel for masking it and using it maybe because you can easily hide it behind the mushroom but in front of the background if you have the depth channel. And then just checking the looks if I will find some kind of color combination or some specific effect which would feel it works slightly better. I usually do this at the end and then just like blending things on top of each other to see how well they works. But now I'm already getting kind of bright energy, maybe a little bit darker in the beginning, but the effect works quite well. Just edging some glow layers, making the render a bit softer and smoother, helping with the energy, which is actually like used with this polarize effect. And now we can just save everything, render it, and check how it works. I usually render MP4 because I export for the socials, like 30 bit rate usually enough. And here you can see like everything is kind of like coming in and out. And let's have a look one more time with audio, and I hope you enjoyed this like walkthrough and you might take some tips from it or maybe even try to recreate your own. So here's the final, and thank you for watching this walkthrough.